The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to another Premiership preview edition of the Scottish Football Podcast. BBC commentator Liam McLeod is here, and joining him and me, David Currie, today is Sandy Armour, aka the Killie Hippo. And today's pod is all about Kilmarnock and not hippopotamus. But Sandy, my curiosity has been piqued. Killie Hippo.
Killie Hippo, I rate the fanzine, the Killie Hippo, and it was named by a guy who used to upside. He was a Clyde fan. He actually did the tannoy stuff at Firhill when Clyde played at Firhill, and we were playing them one day and we went up, but this was before I'd started the fanzine, and he says, "I'll give you and your pals a Mason in the tannoy at half time." I thought it was very nice of you. So at half time he promptly said, "I'd like to give a special mention to the Killie Hippo and his pals," just because of my physical attributes, obviously. And when it came a year or two later, when it came to writing the fanzine, I was trying to think of a name for it. That came into my mind, and it's unfortunately stuck ever since.
You don't look anything like a hippo, but then the listeners don't know that, so we'll run with that. And now, Sandy, at the top of my notes for Kilmarnock, I have written away form and away kit.
Yeah. Last year, I remember sitting doing the podcast last year, it was Ray Bradshaw. But you know how the close season, you're always overcome with optimism, regardless how bad the previous season's been. We just come up from the Championship, and I was with Derek McInnes as manager, and I was thinking, I think we're not here just to survive. We're here for pushing up the league, etc. And then the games actually start and reality kicks in, and you appreciate this isn't going to be quite so easy. So the away form was absolutely diabolical, and it was only coming with the St Mirren game, but I think it was last game before the split. Was it last season? And that was the first.
I don't remember.
Win. That was the first away league game we'd win, unbelievably. And obviously then we did okay in the post-split games, but the away form we deserved to be relegated purely in the away form. So it has to be a lot better. The away strip there's a lot of thought into that, isn't there? the tribute to penicillin away strip. I saw it on Saturday, and it's actually quite a nice strip and stuff, and it seems to have went down very well with the support. So I think credit to whoever come up with it at the club, because it's got a lot of publicity. Seems to be very popular with the fans as well. So a bit of left field thinking that seems to have worked.
Aye, Liam, I know you're a connoisseur of kits from our previous discussion, but apparently this Killie kit has been designed to inspire youngsters to embrace innovation and the discovery that revolutionised medicine, because it's the pattern of the DNA of penicillin discovered by Alexander Fleming, a pupil at Kilmarnock Academy. It's also an ingenious way of getting punters to part with their cash, Liam.
Isn't it just? He's from nearby Darvel, wasn't he? So he's a local boy. He was a local boy.
Surely a Darvel fan then?
Well, possibly. But look, fair play to Kilmarnock for doing that. I know Aberdeen have done a similar thing with the Northern Lights. I know Celtic have done one which embraces the Glasgow music scene, I think, as well. I'm fully behind all that kind of stuff. It's really good, and I don't mind it when it comes to football clubs, kits and things like that, it being a little bit parochial in those terms. And fair play. I don't think it looks the worst, to be fair. Sandy, you got one yourself?
Hippo's got one on.
Not yet. I will probably get one. I'm at the age where strips, you know what I mean? The old kind of fat bloke in a strip isn't a great look, even in the Benidorm beaches. So, but I might get it. It's intriguing as to think what every club could then do. I think there's with strips, in terms of like Killie, obviously traditionally stripes, there's a limit to what you can do with strips, and so I think there's an area there where clubs can exploit, and that's exactly what seems to be happening. Whereas they can, look at whether it's local, a nod to, famous local people or traditions or industry or the UC music scene or that, anything. I think it's a great idea for clubs to try and bring it in. And the kit manufacturers we've got just now, Hummel, they seem to be very good. The stuff we've had over the last couple of years with them has been excellent. So, I think it's something we'll see more of in the future.
And David, one of the most important things I think that Kilmarnock have done this season, and I haven't seen them live yet in their League Cup matches, but apparently they've squared out the numbers on the back of the shirts,
Yeah.
which makes it a lot easier for us being able to see what the numbers of the players are.
Aye,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you what, Sandy, you were saying there's a limit to what you can do with the stripes. Liam, is there a limit to what Derek McInnes can do with this iteration of Kilmarnock?
Yeah, well, look, I remember saying this before, that actually if you'd offered Derek and the club 10th place last season before a ball was kicked, they'd have probably taken it. And okay, it took them until the last day of the league season to confirm that they wouldn't be 11th or 12th, or 11th certainly on the last day. They got there in the end. You know, that was job done. It was a season for consolidation. Now, I'm sure there's Kilmarnock fans within the crowd who are hoping to go higher than that. Those younger ones who, were watching the team under Stevie Clarke and finished third for the first time in an age, gone to Europe for the first time in an age. But they had that sobering experience of the relegation. And I think the season in the Championship, kind of a little bit of a reality check for the younger Kilmarnock fans. Sandy will remember, I would have thought, Kelly, before they had this extended period in the top flight, going back into the kind of 70s and 80s. And since Tommy Burns took them up in the early 90s, they were just a joy to have in the top flight. I think the Kelly fans just got used to them being there. And a lot of the time under Jim Jeffries, perhaps, and Stevie Clarke, most notably, and Bobby Williamson, they were hitting the kind of upper reaches of the top flight as well. So I think it's fair, Sandy, for you guys to perhaps aim a little higher this season.
Yeah, I think so. You're spot on with exactly what you say. There's like a generation of fans, just anything like below sort of 9th place seemed to was a failure. And I'm one of the guys that saw us getting beat at East Stirling 2-1 on a Wednesday night and stuff, in the old second division. So yeah, it's absolutely a reality check, and it was a sobering experience, because when you went down to the Championship, it's just a battle, and it's very competitive, and it's a cracking league, I think, if you're not in it. But when you're in it, it's very, very difficult. And every game's, it's not a place for playing nice football, to be honest with you. You just got to roll up your sleeves, battle for every point you get. And it wasn't pretty, but we got there in one season, which in itself was admirable, because over the years, not a lot of teams have done that. So, yeah, with McInnes here, we thought it would be good. The only sort of mitigating factor, I would say, for last year when we were bad, was there were a few players were signed in 2 years contracts and they were tied up and basically couldn't get rid of. And I think Derek McInnes was seeing his budget. He was kind of hamstrung a wee bit with the budget, because the budget had been used up for guys like that were still. If you were being, in reality, there were Championship players that we had that were now in the Premiership. So now that all that's cleared, everybody's cleared, I think, and that was why part of the reason was a big, huge clear out in the summer. I think it was 15 players we got rid of, including quite a lot of loans. And what you're seeing now is players coming in, and there has players and they're on like 2 3 year deals and stuff. So for that reason, I think there's a bit more stability, a bit more long term planning going on, and hopefully, in terms of the actual team itself, having been at Dunfermline on Saturday, we look, I think, a lot more creative, or certainly potential for being more creative. And that was the reason for losing away games last year. We didn't have goals in us. It's a complete lack of goals. It was more dependent on centre halves for a period to score our goals. So, yeah, I think that's picked up. Like Vassell come on to a game at the end of last season, looked very good, and then he come on and scored a lovely goal on Saturday. So, yeah, I think there's optimism there that we can hopefully finish a wee bit higher last year. But that's tempered with the fact that it's, yourself, between sort of 4th and 12th place, it is really fine lines pretty much every season. And so there's like this man who just had a wee bit of improvement in them, and all of a sudden we're up, challenging the European places. And there'll be another team does that this year. Hopefully it's us, but as I say, it's fine lines. Just a small bit of improvement can get you up a few places in the league, I believe.
Liam, Sandy's talking about the turnover of players at Kilmarnock. You've obviously scrutinised the ins and outs there. Who's impressed you that Derek McInnes has brought into Kilmarnock?
Well, I think they're going to be stronger defensively. Last season, I know Sandy's talking about scoring goals was a problem, and it was, particularly on the road. They were losing a lot of games by the odd goal because they weren't taking chances up the other end. And then ultimately, if you don't do that, you're going to end up losing some games. And that was the case. But I really think he's He's strengthened that area. Lewis Mayo's back. I thought he was really good last season. He was on loan from Rangers. Robbie Dees had an excellent season at Cali Thistle when they began to find some form. And obviously Stuart Findlay's back, and that's a great signing for them. He's back on loan from Oxford, and I mean, they know what they're getting with Findlay. He was one of the mainstays under Steve Clarke, and I think he's going to be a really good signing. And in the other areas, Kyle McGuinness just needs to find fitness. An extended period. Jack Ross loved him, had him at St Mirren, took him to Hibs. He had his injury problems at Easter Road, but if they can get him fit, then that's a terrific midfield player, an attacking player as well. And Matty Kennedy's another who's come back to the club, who was exciting in his first spell there. Another who's had injury problems and kind of fell out of the way at Aberdeen when Barry Robson took over. But he's a local guy. You know, I know he's born in Belfast, but he lives in the Ayrshire area. So that's a good move for him and for both parties, I think. And Marley Watkins is another one who could be a very useful player this season.
And the managerial dream team, Liam, has been broken up. We spoke about this the other day. Tony Docherty has gone to Dundee. He won't be riding shotgun for Derek McInnes this season. I think Derek McInnes will be all right.
I think he'll be fine, but it is going to be a bit weird, particularly when Kilmarnock play Dundee the first time. It's going to be quite strange. But look, he's got a good coaching staff behind him. Paul Sheeran's been with him for a good length of time, probably as long as Tony Dock was with him, actually, not too much less of a period. And Alan Archibald's there as well. He was in charge at Partick Thistle, was most recently, I think, on the staff with Ian McCall there. But he actually had a bit of success at Thistle until things went pear-shaped. But on paper, that's a really excellent managerial team. And look, Derek McInnes is long in the tooth in this game now. You know, he's a guy who knows what he's doing. He knows how to get the best out of his players. And as I said earlier, last season was about consolidation. Derek McInnes, I'm not sure what he'd say publicly was the target for him this season, but he's got to be at the back of his mind thinking, if I can get this squad going, we can do, as Sandy said, what St Mirren did last season and potentially get into that top six, where you would probably have to say you would still expect, Aberdeen, Hibs and Hearts to be in there with Rangers and Celtic in the upcoming season, you would think. So that only leaves that one space available. There'll be a couple of others who'll have designs on that as well, of course.
Sandy, I read a report from your MD, the club's MD there, just at the end of last week, and I was fascinated by this phrase. It says, under the manager Derek McInnes, we have witnessed flashes of a bright future.
Yeah, as I say, I think that's carefully worded, because last season it was only flashes and there was no consistency involved, again mainly due to the away form. I suppose the flashes would relate to the home performances. Our home record was what saved us ultimately. I know a lot of people use the old plastic surfaces as an excuse. However, it's, we had a good record there last year, and obviously we look to maintain that and to improve on it. I think with Derek McInnes, when we got Derek McInnes, I was delighted. I thought when we played, we had a terrible record against Aberdeen, and even with Stevie Clarke was there, we struggled. Not particularly pretty in the eye, but they'd go 1-0 and they would win 1-0. We're hard to break down, and we were expecting a bit of the same, and we just never seemed to get any of that. But I think now that he's this summer with a full transfer window to bring in exactly who he wants, I think you'll see Kilmarnock being a bit more streetwise, probably, I'm hoping. And if we do go one goal up, the opposition will find us very hard to play against and hard to break down. And I think up at Dunfermline on the Saturday, there was sort of signs of that a wee bit. So, yeah, I think that there was a carefully worded statement, because it only was in flashes last season, and I think we really need to be far more consistent this coming campaign.
That's the holy grail, though, of clubs at that kind of level, isn't it, Liam? Consistency, building a wee bit of momentum, and getting out the blocks a bit more quickly than they did last season.
Yeah, no, a good start's massive, and you can go on to achieve great things if you have a good start. Easier said than done, of course. But see if Derek can get Kilmarnock going, like Stevie did, when you look back at some of those big games, I always think back to the Rangers game at the end of the season when Kelly finished third, and the crowd in there that day was magnificent. The home crowd was bustling. It was loud. It was getting to that point for the Ross County game, actually, at the end of last season. And then I think back to the playoff win over Falkirk. The place was bouncing. It's a question of getting these guys back every other week, when there's a home game, getting them in to the stadium, because Rugby Park's it's a really atmospheric ground if you can fill it up. And I think Killie, they released a statement, was it the tail end of last week, saying that the denial of the extra stand, because they used to give them off and Chadwick stands up to the old firm, they say they haven't counted the cost for that. So it's about trying, Sandy, I'm sure you agree, it's about trying to get these guys who turn up for these big games coming back on a regular basis, and even getting them buying season tickets.
We've suffered a wee bit because our ground's a wee bit bigger than others, they maybe built the sort of 10,000 type thing.
It's bigger than you'd think, when you look at the actual capacity of Rugby Park, it's bigger than you'd think, isn't it?
It is. It was up at 18, but then what's happened now is they've put some office stuff in that in the Moffat stand behind one of the goals, so it'll reduce. I don't know, it's maybe doing about 15 or 16. It's
just over 15, yeah.
Aye, yeah. So if you get something even about kind of 8,000 and stuff, it's a good atmosphere. I think last year we had about 5,000 season tickets, and I think we're aiming towards something similar this year. The problem is that's pretty much the hard core, and if you're just playing run-of-the-mill games, if you like, you tend not to get a huge number of pay at the gates over and above that. But you're right, it's all to do with. For the fans are there is a fan base there, a bigger fan base, and if we get onto a wee good run and get up to threatening top six, you will see the crowds getting up and stuff, but it's all to do with the product in the park, isn't it? If we can get a few results, and as you say about the start of the season, I think that's what Murren's success last year was totally based on. They had a fantastic start to the season, didn't they? And they maybe dropped off a wee bit in the new year. However, the good work in the early part of the campaign carried them a long way, and I think that's what you've got to be aiming for.
Well, you've got a tough start though, haven't you? What was it, Rangers, Hearts?
Right. Yeah, and Motherwell away. So very hard. But, it can be argued that to get Rangers or Celtic first game is the best time to get them, when they're new players bedding in, etc., new squad, and a bit of the unknown. So, it is very difficult. Of course it is, but it's maybe the best time to be playing them.
Well, Sandy, you said at the start of our discussion that last season, when you did this podcast with Ray Bradshaw, that you were confident. Are you sanguine, hopeful this campaign, or maybe a wee bit fearful?
I'm not fearful. I'm going to temper my enthusiasm. I'm going to try and, as I say, I think what you said earlier was 100% right. We finished 10th last season, so I think you've got to be looking for improvement. The 9th even, it sounds very, unambitious, but an improvement in last season to me would be acceptable. So if it means 8th or 9th, then fine. That's for a club like us, that's fine. Ultimately, I think that McInnes will be looking to, whether it's next season or the next couple of seasons, go a bit higher than that and challenge for the top six. And if we do happen to get that, then absolutely fantastic. And as I say, I think the fans would come back out a wee bit if you did do that. But yeah, just an improvement in last year would be acceptable, and hopefully nice a wee cup run again, maybe get to Hampden.
So you're happy with 9th, but where do you think they'll finish?
I'll say 8th.
8th. Well, Sandy, you have the last word there on this Premiership preview edition of the Scottish Football Podcast. My thanks to Killie fan Sandy Armour, I'll say it again, aka the Killie Hippo, and BBC commentator Liam McLeod, and most of all to you for listening. There will be another Premiership preview podcast tomorrow.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.